Christian, how you doing, mate?
All good. All good. Thank you, Jazz. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Thank you for jumping on during this lockdown period. How's it been treating you?
It's been interesting. Like, as I'm telling all my other clients, it's mostly business as usual. So I was in the Google campus for about a month, and then I went back to working from my bedroom. So yeah, it's all good.
Cool. So for those who don't know, give us a bit of background. What are you working on at the moment?
So basically working on a brand new advertising medium. So I was in Google, and then I was in Facebook, and I developed my own games. And I love producing music. So, and it gave me an idea to work on this new audio-based advertising solution. So it's non-intrusive advertising within mobile games. So cool. A gamer can continue playing the game while opting in to listen to an audio ad, rather than being blocked by a video ad and kind of, getting annoyed at the game.
Wicked. How did you come up with the idea? I can probably guess.
So basically, I've always loved making music.
Just prop up your camera a little bit.
Oh, sorry, like that.
There we go. You're better shot now. Yeah.
Okay, great. I've always produced like hip hop and jazz music, and I love producing mobile games. So what I started doing was I started making games that would promote my favorite music producers. So I was like talking to them, getting their music, and then plugging it in. But obviously, because I've got advertising experience as well, I started thinking, some people do play mobile games with their sound on, and they get annoyed with ads. Is there an opportunity there? I came up with an idea, started chucking it around, pivoting it, and then we kind of got a product market fit when we got our first ad network game developer combined with the audio advertiser, and we kind of made the whole thing work. So yeah, that's how I came up with it and how I kind of brought it to market.
Awesome. And I hear you've raised your round, so congratulations on that. But before we get into that, take me back to the beginning. So you came up with the idea. You were at the time you were working.
Yeah.
Cool. So how did that play out? How did you come up from the inception of the idea to then building out a team and getting to the point you're at now?
That's a very long question. I'll give you a slightly shorter version. So basically, when I was coming up with the idea, it definitely isn't what it is now. I mean, I initially thought this was going to be some kind of music gaming studio or something. It was more about the execution and around validating the idea that I was really working on. Because the first idea that you have, it never really is the idea that it is when you get funding. So what I did was I had an idea. It was pretty cool. I had a game that could promote musicians and things like that. Started going to hackathons. The way I saw it, initially I was before I kind of got into the whole engineering-y side of things, I was purely in sales, and I was always nervous going to hackathons. So produced the game, POC, if you will, took that to a hackathon and started networking my arse off. Approaching all the smartest engineers in the room, VCs, everything like that. And what that gave me was I guess you could say a first lesson in, how to structure a team. And it was a Techstars hackathon. That was one of the first ones I went to. And what it does is it enables you to quickly get together in a team and quickly create a business case. Learn how to, as founder of the team, because it was my idea that they were building out, how to organize engineers and things like that. So I went to a lot of hackathons as I was refining the idea, meeting more, smart people that were further along than I was, and then learning off them. That's how I started training myself in order to, generate a team.
Cool. And so have you got an engineering background? You mentioned you did a bit of sales and then you moved on to engineering. What's the background in terms of your mix there? Would you say you're a tech founder, or would you say you're more sales product driven?
I'd say I'm more sales product driven. So think of me, I think of myself rather as a more technically able oriented product guy. I came from sales, but I guess you could say I educated myself as to how to increase my technical ability through doing something I love, which was creating games. Mm-hmm. So outside of just being able to, sell the dream and sell the vision, I can also talk to an engineer, make I guess you could say reasonable requests as to what product features are and things like that. So I like to think myself as the best of both worlds. That's how I try.
You've got the perfect hybrid because you can have some empathy from the development point of view as well. So,
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. At Facebook and Google, you were in a primarily sales role in both of those roles. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So what kind of skills would you say that set you up with, which have helped transfer over to AudioMob?
So many different things. So the first thing has to be Google's sales program is pretty amazing. I noticed a lot of similarities actually between the sales program that I went through and Jordan Belfort's straight line sales that I actually watched and read up on before I entered. In terms of, I guess the way that I'd phrase this is, I was privileged in a way that I was able to sell a product where there were so many different integral features that you could pitch that feature to overcome any objection that you'd get. And what that enabled me to do is think of the structure of a sales conversation and how to, link someone's goals to a feature that you're building. I would say from a sales perspective, that was massively, massively helpful because the way that I think about how to sell my startup to various different audiences as the startup product's constantly changing helps massively. So that's from a sales perspective. From a product perspective, I guess it's a double-edged sword because Google makes amazing products, but at the same time, they kind of sometimes sit in that ivory tower, make a product and expect it to go well, and it doesn't. So the whole Google way of doing things and the way that you would approach a product, that I definitely gained some positive experience there. Me being strictly the non-technical founder, my CTO, who's an ex-Google engineer, he could definitely speak more on this than I can, but that definitely gave me a positive influence. The third thing is because I was managing such large clients and large portfolio. I can't get my words out now. Portfolios. These portfolios were north of $100 million, right? So I got the opportunity to manage lots of different teams. So, some engineering teams, product teams, customer success teams, sales teams, organizing all of that. That had a massive, massive influence of how I'm organizing the team today. So I'd say those are the three main things.
Did you find it working at such a massive company had any negative impacts for you walking into a startup? The things I would think of naturally, if you were at a place like Google or Facebook, naturally in terms of their sales process, they carry a certain brand reputation. So a lot of that is going to be inbound. How has that worked out for you setting up AudioMob, where naturally you're going to have to talk about your brand a lot more to even get your foot into the door, as opposed to walking around with a Google t-shirt on?
That's a really good question. And I guess,
because that's a natural challenge, right? A lot of founders will be like, you build it and they'll come. It doesn't work anymore. Sorry, it doesn't work anymore.
So I say I'm quite unusual in the sense that to give you a short backstory, I rejected a job offer straight out of uni. I rejected a job offer at Google to work in a prop tech startup. So I have like a massive entrepreneurial kind of spark. I'm kind of obsessed with that whole that whole journey. And when things didn't work at that startup, obviously I learned a lot of things. But then I went into Google knowing that okay, I'm going to skill up at one of the world's best tech companies, but I will eventually start my own company. So in terms of the trap that a lot of people fall into, that perhaps didn't initially have that entrepreneurial aspiration, or maybe didn't work at a startup before Google, there is a trap of being constantly comfortable where literally everything is provided for you. The pay is good, you don't have to work that many hours, all that kind of stuff. So I was always conscious of that that kind of weakness that it could produce going in. With Google, they literally, it's like they're printing money. I don't talk to a sales client being at Google saying, oh, do you want to buy us? It's how much do you want to pay us now or later? So it was an upselling exercise. So I was always very, very conscious, coming from a prop tech startup with no name, how hard a startup sell actually is. So I think the only thing I fended off against was let's just say the way that Google and Facebook are structured, they are designed to give you a very, very comfortable experience and a very lucrative career path.
Yep.
It was just always fending off those ideas, saying, oh, it could be comfortable and work and get this salary X, Y, and Z. It was just fending off that and just and just concentrating on the entrepreneur aspiration. I'd say that was the main thing I had to fend off.
That definitely resonates with me, Christian. I mean, the journey you described there within the tech space of Facebook, Google, I had a similar start into entrepreneurship through the investment banking world. So I worked for a top investment bank in London, and similar to you, I knew when I went in there, I just couldn't stay comfortable. If you go in there to learn stuff, and I need to get out and do my entrepreneurial bit, and that definitely allows you to not get comfortable. Anybody who knows me knows that I always talk about not having, if you want to do entrepreneurship, you can't have anchors in your life. You can't get comfortable. You can't get used to having that lease on that car, or that, being tied to that property, or used to a certain holiday every year. You need to be loose so you could be creative and take the risks that you need to take early on in your career within business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely resonates. Cool. So let's move on to, the idea came about. This is where a lot of young founders listening, this is kind of the hard step. How did you take your first step towards, from an idea to an actual company? We're talking office space. We're talking your first team member. We're talking your first set of clients and paying revenue. Just paint that picture for me and give people an idea of how you took that leap of faith. Because in my mind, that's the moment a business is really created, as opposed to an idea, which any person can have an idea.
So let me have a think about that, actually. Okay, so there is.
What would you say came first to make it a bit easier for you? Did you start building the product? Did a natural client come to you? Or was your first recruit come to you? There's so many different ways that people start out in business. Sometimes they find a perfect co-founder. They have no idea, no clients, no product idea, but they go, me and this guy or this girl, we're going to rock. Let's build a company. Alternatively, you have a great idea, and then you find the person and the clients. Or you have a natural client where this guy just trusts you and loves you and they want to do business with you, but you don't have a product to sell them, and you go figure out the product. Which one of those, or if any of those, kind of?
So for me, it was definitely coming up with an idea, and that idea was born out of two things I was passionate about: music and gaming. It took me a long time. We're talking about months and months and months here of just thinking of what do I like and how can I make it into a business. And that's a lot of something that people struggle on there. How do I come up with an idea that I'm passionate about, right? But in the context of my advertising expertise, it was kind of like you're looking at a very wide landscape, and you're trying to figure out how to connect something I like and then make it productive. Now, I was going to try and create a non-profitable gaming studio and something much more as a hobby, right? So it's just coming up with an idea where you will wake up at 4 a.m. in order to work on that idea. And I remember when I was teaching myself game development, I bloody loved it. It was sick. It was absolutely sick. So like as soon as I would wake up, how you wake up and then you drive back to sleep. As soon as I wake up, I was up making games. So that's when I knew I was onto something that I think I could turn into something bigger. So that's the first thing. The next thing was, okay, if I can now make this game more scalable, is there an actual industry opportunity here? The next step is validating that idea. And I mean, even my brother was asking me, like, how the hell do you start up a business, even if you've got an idea that might have legs? Yeah. The idea is to validate it from a number of perspectives. So the first perspective is, okay, maybe I can get users. Where do I find users? I was thinking, hackathons. For so the initial gaming idea before it turned into audio ads, it was just audio, music. So
you built out the first MVP yourself?
Yeah. So the initial concept wasn't streaming audio ads, though. It was streaming music to promote music producers. So it was a pivot from that startup. But that was the first MVP, and I created the game to promote the musicians. I guess a short story on that. Rather than teaching myself to code, whether it's C# or Python or JavaScript or HTML or whatever you can use to create a game, I actually used a pseudocode called Stencil. So Stencil is a game design program where you don't actually need to learn to code. By using the blocks represent the variables that you use to create the game, but you can open up the blocks and then teach yourself to code in little snippets. So I took I guess you could say, a hacky shortcut, but that taught me the principles of engineering, a little bit about coding, how to link APIs, all that kind of stuff, to put together a game. So learn to do that.
That's a super important point, Christian. I just want to spend an extra minute on that because
sure.
So many young founders are trying to make the perfect MVP before they even know if there's a demand for their product. They're trying to build out the perfect bit of code, the perfect front-end UI, UX, spending loads of money on it, and they don't know if anybody wants to use it. So completely agree with what you said there.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I learned at Hackathon as well, actually. Like, you've got to come up with the absolute minimum that, like the minimal viable product, the absolute minimum feature that a customer would want to use or pay for. You can even fake it, so you don't have to code it. Like if it's let's say, for instance, if it's a website where you sign up to something and then you, I don't know, you get personalized pasta sent to you, for instance, right? Terrible idea. But the idea,
something, Christian. Let's go 50-50. Come on.
Right. So the idea, I mean, you don't even need to code in order to make that whole thing work. You just spin up a Wix site, make the sign up page, promote it, and then personally deliver the pasta. Like this is how you validate the idea, rather than just with the coding.
Absolutely. We spoke on one of the earlier episodes of this podcast about how Airbnb scaled their initial photography. So the founders themselves went out to each host's house with a camera to take the professional looking cameras, which now obviously they've scaled out now to having professional photographers go out. But it's about scaling the unscalable and building out that
use case. Yeah, no, really, really cool.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, also after that, hacked it together. Went to the hackathons, and I guess another major point here is if you're a non-technical founder, so me, I was a sales guy that hacked together something. I wasn't really a coder, but I had technology that I could show an engineer. The way I approached this was, I don't want an engineer just thinking I'm a sales guy that's just spouting some nonsense. Like I could actually get my ass together to produce something.
Yeah.
I went to the hackathons with this mindset and to learn more about engineers, how they approach things and things like that. You will, if you go to enough hackathons, you will meet some kind of entrepreneurial engineer that you will eventually, want to work with, or who could become your co-founder. They are absolutely amazing for non-technical founders to meet engineers. Because on the flip side, what I learned at my first hackathon is that the engineering mindset, for a large part, it's, they want to build really, really cool things. And I'm speaking very generally here, but they want to build cool stuff and not concentrate as much on the business. So the engineers actually need a non-technical founder as much as the non-technical founder needs an engineer, and that's really key to understand in the early days.
So did your CTO go first?
Say that again.
Was your CTO your first recruit/team member?
Yeah, met my first CTO at the Techstars Hackathon. Yeah, and basically the reason I say first CTO, absolutely amazing. Like 20 years of experience in streaming tech, really amazing dude. As we switched from an audio music company to like an ad tech oriented company, the CTO became the advisor of the ad tech company because music ad tech wasn't his thing, but music was. And then I met my second CTO for the ad tech company at Google. But yeah, first CTO, met him at Hackathon.
Cool. And for those currently looking for their first recruit, be it a CTO or co-founder, having been through that process and going to these hackathons, what was I know, obviously you can meet somebody serendipitously, but what would you say would be the one key thing you should be looking out for? I know you probably have a longer list than one, but if you just try to pick one or two, what would that look like?
First thing, you've got to want to spend time with your CTO.
True.
Yeah. Like I am not exaggerating. Your CTO, who may or may not become your co-founder, you will speak to this person more than any other human. I am not joking. More than your parents, your girlfriend, your siblings, your friends, more than anyone. Yeah. So you have to make sure that you get on with the CTO. That's number one, actually. Number two is, and it's very hard to know in the early stages, the like what specific experience that CTO will need. But you need to make sure that the CTO has the skill sets you need, whether it's the code. And if you don't know if you know what coding languages you need, then you should go read up on what coding languages can achieve what kind of frameworks, what kind of software you can build. Right, you need to read up on that so you can get a rough idea of what skill set a CTO will have. And obviously, if you find a CTO that's safe, he will be able to help you understand if he's a good fit or not. Outside of that, I mean, I was lucky finding my first CTO with 20 years of experience. That is not the typical luck that a typical early stage founder would get. So on the flip side, if you've got a CTO that has, it could be, very young or maybe inexperienced, but has, a bit of experience to, whip up a couple of, POCs, MVPs or whatever, is to make sure that CTO has, I guess you could say, vision and drive to learn new things. Because in my experience, talking to a lot of founders, when it comes to finding a CTO outside of wanting to spend time with them and having the experience, is finding someone that has that same entrepreneurial drive that you do. Because if you've got a CTO that he might know C#, but you need him to learn, I don't know, HTML or something like that, so he becomes a full stack developer or something. You're going to want to see him want to learn as much as he can in order to help you build out that idea. So if it means learning another language, if it means working late, if it means doing the tasks that need to be done in between like lunch times in his job, like that's the kind of CTO that you would want if he's experienced. I know it's a long answer, but it's a really, really important point.
No, absolutely, very important point. And I think one of the kind of bear traps that a lot of first-time founders fall into is when they think of bringing on a technical co-founder, they're always looking for the biggest rock star coder they could find. And that may be a false economy for you in early days. The best CTO may not necessarily be the best coder or the best engineer. And I think you touched upon that very well, where they need that balance of enterprise and ingenuity. It reminds me of the saying that Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn always says. He says, if you're not embarrassed of your first ship of your product, you've launched too late. You've launched your MVP too late. And I think sometimes if you find a technical founder who's too possessive with his or her code and they want everything to be 100% perfect, you may end up struggling with your CTO because you're never going to get anything shipped. You're never going to get a feedback loop. You're not going to be able to launch, iterate, and get your 360 loop going. So I think that's definitely something to consider is, it's not necessarily somebody who's super smart in terms of the coding, but they need that balance. They need to obviously be good, and then they need to have that balance in terms of their enterprise and understanding, look, it's more important to launch something quickly that's 80% done than it is to spend 6 years and never launch something that's 100% done. So coming on to kind of how you then brought your CTO as a co-founder or as just CTO?
So good question. He started off as a CTO and now is the co-founder based on all the amazing stuff that he's done. So yeah,
I want to dig into that if you don't mind, because again, just another bear trap that a lot of founders fall into. I can see just by your answer there how you've managed to do it. What would your advice be to somebody who is looking for a co-founder? They know in their head they're looking for a co-founder. What would your advice be to them of how they bring on board a potential CTO, co-founder, and when they should start then discussing actually moving from, do they give them a test project? Do they start them working for a little bit before seeing if they're a good fit? How did you do that bit?
So that's an interesting question. And there are
so many founders get burned. They meet somebody for a week. They think this is the best CTO ever. Fine, sign off the equity, get them on the cap sheet, and 2 months later they fall out, or they realize that wasn't the right CTO. They fell for the razzmatazz. What do you think the best way? What advice would you give to these guys?
So a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this one. And it depends on, if you, and I don't really want to blow my own trumpet here, but I know that I am pretty good at selling the dream and the concept of an idea And I think that so if you've got the ability to do that, if you really believe in what you're doing, it is relatively easy to persuade someone to start working with you, without demanding 10% equity, vested over a month or something stupid like that. Like it's pretty easy. All you have to do is really know your stuff, know your market, believe in your idea, and obviously show that that you are of a good character and wouldn't obviously screw your co-founder or anything legally or otherwise. The way that I did this is everyone that came on board, I basically had a rough idea of what equity I would give them. So the idea is, your idea could be, if it is your idea, a lot of people think that, it's my idea, I'm going to have like 80%. That's not really like how it works. Your idea is pretty much worth nothing if you do not have the skills to execute on the idea. So at most, if it's your idea, 5-10% maybe.
Yeah.
In terms of your skill sets and how you can position yourself to execute on that idea, you need to kind of set a benchmark in terms of how important are these tasks relative to executing on that idea. And I guess you could gauge it out of 10 in terms of, is it more important that we do direct sales? Is it more important that I have these connections, etc.? And then you would compare that to the technical expertise, perhaps, of someone that you would bring on, like a CTO, and also how replaceable they are. So to give you an example, because I'm going to speak in broad terms before I go down into the numbers. If you've got if your idea is based upon a technology that already exists, but you're adapting how it works. So, for instance, your technology is a website where you sign up to do stuff, right? That technology is very, very different to a deep tech AI oriented idea that may improve the way that you target certain users. If we're talking about ad tech, for instance, so a deep tech CTO is going to be exponentially worth more equity than a CTO that may just be, building a sign-up website in the early phases, that is. So the way that I approached it is, okay, I've got a gaming music streaming idea, and I need a streaming CTO. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this guy on and start him off at 10%, knowing based on what I've read on Core and things like that, that if you're ever going to pay a CTO a salary, a 6-figure salary, usually you'd give them 5%. As I can't pay anyone, I'm going to give them 10%. But we shook hands on the agreement that based on how this startup progresses, if we get funding and things like that, there would be a kind of milestone. So, if you build a PhD, you get X percentage. If you build an MVP that can be deployed, you get a percentage, etc. So I kind of start the CTO off on the low end, and then I give them a chance to prove themselves. Now, again, handshaking agreements are very dangerous depending on the characters that you're dealing with. But that's how I've done pretty much all of my early stage agreements, and it's worked out great.
Cool. I think that gives a good background. And yeah, on that point, I think obviously a lot of illegal people will be turning their heads, but as an entrepreneur, it comes back to your first point of you're going to be working with this person day in, day out. So if you don't have a certain element of trust, then you shouldn't be talking about any equity or co-founder relationship there. But of course, you've got to secure yourself. There's plenty of famous examples of social networks where this has gone horribly wrong. So a caveat there for everybody to make sure they do seek legal advice with their co-founders for sure. Document in place, which is good hygiene. Cool. So you built out your team, got yourself a good CTO. What was next for AudioMob at that stage?
It would have to. So at that point, CTO had a full team. So the idea was, what the hell do I need to get funding?
This is the topic I do want to touch on, because obviously you've managed to successfully close a round. Did you close it during COVID?
So part of the round was before, and part of it was during COVID. Yeah, we had to pivot like that narrative, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a feather in your cap. That's a great job, Christian. Closing around during COVID. That's some serious business. So talk about that. When did you come across the point of, look, I need funding, first of all? Secondly, what did the company look like at that point? What was your vision? And then how did you go about taking the methodical steps to seeking out, where do I start and how do I even go about getting this thing called funding? Where do I meet these super friendly angels and VCs? Where do they live?
So one of the best things that I did that made me realize I needed funding, one was go to the Techstars hackathon and then hackathons after that, where there's not so much the hack that they're concentrating on, but equally the business case as well, and figuring out, okay, like if I'm really going to start thinking about, how am I going to afford the salaries and the technology and how do I price everything and who do I need in order to help me to price the engineering work and all that kind of stuff. Like the initial hackathon is what made me realize that, I can't just, build a product with a team of guys that I'm friends with and hope users come and then, have a Snapchat or a Facebook story. Like, it's not how it works. The second thing as well is off the back of the hackathon, I heard of, incubators and accelerators and pre-accelerators and all of these different frameworks that help entrepreneurs figure out and learn what VCs are looking for. So I ended up going to this pre-accelerator part of the NDRC. So this was the NDRC is was it National Digital Research Center of Ireland or something like that. They were hosting these classes where they would teach entrepreneurs that had good experience and good ideas, but didn't really have a team. They'll teach them basically what VCs are looking for and what things you need to prove in order to validate your idea. So in a long answer, I was basically seeking different knowledge groups and knowledge sources as to how to raise money. You won't figure it out just from looking on the internet. But in my experience, you need to go out and find people that have raised. Start speaking to friendly VCs that are scouting for future entrepreneurs at these events. Like that's what I did, and it did take longer than I'd like to admit in order to kind of learn what I needed to learn.
And that's a great piece of advice. And just to kind of add my experience onto that as well, like you'll find that depending on which industry or niche your business is in, whether it's a SaaS company, whether it's a mobile app company, whether it's something else, the VCs who operate in your market will have very specific criteria and metrics which they're looking for before you will even get your foot into the door to present. So it's very important, like Christian said, that you want to get out. You want to get out there and meet these VCs and ask them over a coffee, like, if I come back in 2 years' time, what do my metrics need to look like for you to be interested? Or if I come back in 6 months' time, what does it need to look like for you to be interested? And then go and work towards that.
Yeah, exactly. And have a one. I remember the first deck that I made. Actually, this is why I know so much about Airbnb. They shared a deck years ago on LinkedIn. I think it's their first startup pitch deck, and I was like, oh, okay, this must be the way that I build a deck. So I built a deck, showed the VC, your first deck will be absolute crap. It will just suck, and then you just need to reiterate on it until you get the right one that will get you into enough doors. So that was kind of a strand of education that I went on. Another thing as well, and to be honest,
sorry, Christian, just coming back on that, the deck becomes easy to make once you understand what the VCs want. The only reason your first deck becomes shitty is because you're doing it from what you think is important, not from what they think is important. So as soon as you network and you've spoken to them, you're just telling them what they've told you they want to see. So it packs itself around.
It sounds kind of simple, but you're going to get to a point where you're going to talk to enough people and VCs, and you're going to get asked so many questions that it helps you reiterate your deck to the perfect deck, where it will get you in the door, and then there's a next layer of questions for like the next part of that journey, which will be how to scale and how to generate revenue and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, outside of learning how to make a good deck, I actually realized this really late, actually, just before I raised, because before we initially raised and we had the POC and MVP and things like that, we basically shifted all of our concentration onto making the first pound. So rather than concentrating on the bigger deals that will take months and months to execute, just concentrate on making the first pound with your MVP. If you can do that and then have a good deck, and then increase your sales ability to sell the dream. If you have those things, you should be able to raise. And I guess after learning how to build a good deck, and I had the team. It was just figuring out, okay, how do I make that first pound? What do I need to build? How many customers do I need to talk to? Those are the main things that I concentrated on.
Cool. And before you headed down the VC route, how did you calculate or come to the figure of how much you need to raise? How did you work out, this is how much I need to do the next step? What was your thinking and rationale behind that? One of the key things obviously is going to be, you mentioned there, what does a team need to look like that I'm going to build out? And obviously, given your background at Facebook and Google, were you of the mindset that I need to hire the same caliber of engineers I saw, or were you more focused of probably won't be able to afford the pay packages that Facebook and Google are? I may need to go for a tier down in terms of developers until we can afford it. What was your thinking around that?
So my thinking around that was so the funding round. People know that we funded, but I don't know the amount. So that's going to get released later. So I can't.
No, you don't need to mention the amount.
but
you tell me later.
Yeah, definitely. The first thing is whatever your first figure is, it will be wrong, and you'll probably need to double it or maybe triple it. That is just how things work. The way that I came up with the first figure, which was I think it was like 250K or something, it was like way too small, is when it comes to the and I learned this in the pre-accelerator as well. And sorry, a caveat to that. I asked a good friend of mine who called Ed, who raised money internally within BT Ventures. I was like, okay, what is the financial model that you used? As in, the numbers behind the story. What did you use in order to persuade BT to give you that investment? He gave me a blank version of that spreadsheet, and that gave me an idea of all the variables I needed to consider. And I rebuilt that bloody spreadsheet like 12 times or something. But it gives you an idea of like every single variable you need to think about.
So we're talking, in your case, server costs, developers, recruits, office space, other bits and pieces ad hoc, just for
office space. Like, you don't need to worry about like tax and reclaiming back things like that. But all the main expenditure of your staff, fixed costs. If you scale from one customer to 100,000 customers, so you can get the idea of the unit economics, you basically map all of that out. And then you start tweaking it. So the forecast is almost like a sensitivity or a scenario test, right? Where the way I structured it is you've got a list of assumptions in one tab, and all of those assumptions are mapped into the forecast. And then you start tweaking things around based on what you find out about your customers. And then you extend that to maybe a 3 to 4 years. And then in every single year, you'll obviously make adjustments to your assumptions based on the growth of the company. So that is what I did. It sounds long because it kind of is in the early days, but it's something that will really help you figure out how much money you need to raise. And in terms of the key benchmark, it's 18 months, like what will, based on what you assume is going to happen over the next, 3 years, in your first 18 months, how much money will you need with zero revenue? So once you come up with the forecast, you find that number, and then usually you'll have to times it by 2 or 3.
Got it. So you worked off the basis of, I need 18 months worth of runway. What does that look like once I start building out that team, given the unit economics?
Yeah, and pretty much every VC will tell you to at least have that calculation.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know, unit economics, again, look into this, guys. This is super important to really start mapping out. If you've built a product, you're looking to take it to market, you need to know how much does a single sign up or a customer subscriber bring to the pot. And it's, so many companies think about this too late. Once they've scaled up and they've got masses of users, and they say, oh, we'll worry about monetizing later. But then at that point, maybe the unit economics don't stack up. And particularly if you're looking to raise money, Christian will tell you, one of the first questions you're going to be asked is to map out that unit economics and explain how you derive value from it.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is, I guess, to put it into a really simple terms that I was thinking about, or that I was told, and then I started thinking this way, is if you make £1 profitably, then you need to raise enough money so you can turn that £1 into 100,000 a month profitably. So, I mean, hell, you might not be profitable when you're making that 100K a month, but the fact that you've proven the scale is there, then you raise a bit more money so you can scale to where you're massively profitable. That's how you have to start thinking about it from the first pound.
Also, and just another analogy, which is kind of the way I think about unit economics, is let's take an example like Uber. If Uber cannot figure out how to be profitable off every single taxi ride, when they do millions of taxi rides, they're not going to be profitable. If you're losing £1 on every single taxi rides and you do 1 million taxi rides, you've lost £1 million. So you need to figure out at the very fundamental level of what you're doing, even on the pound level, that's the whole concept of unit economics and making sure you've stacked that up in your favor early on.
I guess one note on that, because my business is like a B2B business, even though the consumers are obviously very important, the gamers, right? It is a B2B business. When it comes to B2C, anyone that is not thinking about monetization, and they're, B2C, maybe they're an apps company or social apps or dating company or something like that, if they're not thinking about that, then the way you need to be thinking about it is, if you have built a POC and that POC, gets thousands and thousands of downloads, so you've got users, and then you start mapping retention and things like that, that kind of model, that is when you don't really need to worry about monetization, because you're worried about the stickiness. So that there aren't many examples where a business won't have to worry about unit economics if they're a B2C business. So I guess keep that in mind. If you're not worried about the monetization, you better have a lot of users initially.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're going, like you said, if you're going down the B2C route, then your metrics are definitely going to be around how much usage you have on.
I think something might be blaring out on my on my laptop. One sec.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was watching an educational video just before this thing started going on.
No, we can get educated. It's fine. Yeah, definitely. If you want to go down the B2C route, then and you're going after user growth with the idea of monetizing once you're at 1 million subs or 2 million subs, then the metric you really want to be using at is your daily active users, i.e., how much presence do you have in that person user's mind. Netflix is a great example. Snapchat, these kind of platforms, they're all focused on making sure you're logging into that account not just daily, but now a number of times a day. So they've got mind share, and therefore later on when they choose to monetize, whether that's through ads or through the data that they serve, they know that they've got the user base there locked in so that they can then monetize that later on. But for the majority of businesses, like Christian said there, it's going to be a case of figuring out your unit economics. And even those companies, they're the unicorns, they're the rarity, and some companies will achieve that success. But the fundamental entrepreneurship is unit economics. You don't want to be selling a piece of bread at a loss, because selling 100 pieces of bread, you're going to make more of a loss. So absolutely. Cool. So you went on to raise the fund. So did you meet your VC through networking then, was it, in the end?
Yeah, so this is something else that might be considered unusual. So it was through networking, but the way that I network is I'm calling it the conduit approach, right? So I will obviously develop my own connections as they come, but in terms of actively going out there and networking, what I was doing is I'd have the idea, I have the dream, I'd be building in a team. But I would always be conscious that the people that I'm bringing in have amazing networks. And while I like to think that I'm relatively okay at closing deals, the lead investor that invested in us actually came from my CTO. It's because my CTO was at an event. He's an unusual CTO where he's really technical able, but he loves networking, going to events and things like that. And a lot of the investment leads initially came from him. Of which then I would
rare species, definitely.
Yeah. So it was a lot of networking, but I tapped into a lot of other people's networks, whether it's via a favor or whether I brought them into the company because they also provided some other value. That's how I did it.
Cool. And in terms of when you sat down with these VCs, I mean, obviously you're looking for the funding. What other criteria were top of your mind? You mentioned network. Was there anything else you kind of considered when vetting out these guys?
So in terms of the VC,
what was important to you in your decision making?
So it was definitely the network. So knowing that we're in the gaming and advertising technology space, so the only VCs we really wanted on board were either gaming or media tech VCs The reason is when it comes to the kind of money that you raise, it's kind of a derogatory term, but there's dumb money, right, and there's smart money. Now, it's not necessarily saying that the VCs are dumb or anything. It's just that the VCs need to have specific knowledge on your startup. I'd say so. If you're going to get a lead investor, the first investor that comes in, they really should have a lot of knowledge on your startup vertical. That way, outside of the money, they can, for instance, introduce you to new clients, partners, keep you up to date on competitors, like have a real impact on your company. So that was a really, really important factor. The second thing is the actual personality of the VC as well. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Some VCs behave very, very badly during COVID. I'm not going to obviously mention who they are, but there are some horror stories like a founder impacted by the coronavirus became depressed. VC took away the term sheet. You got other VCs that just let the companies die out when they initially promised them that they'll help them through harder times, like the pandemic. So there's a lot of VCs that behave very badly. Fortunately, our VC is absolutely amazing. So like a needle in the haystack. So in terms of finding out and vetting the VC, so you can find out the human characteristics behind the VC, that was really, really important to us as well. And luckily, the one of the VCs that we found, absolutely amazing to deal with, like really, really good.
What sort of things were your VC group able to help with during this pandemic? What kind of things were they able to do outside of the norm that you really valued?
I'd say the first thing is listen. So they were able to, outside of like they had a general human concern as well, which is nice to see. They did want to listen rather than kind of hammer down on all of the startups and say, okay, what are you doing to navigate this? They sat back and listened, saying, okay, I understand what's going on. We understand that the environment right now is very stressful for startups. So just want to talk to you about what we can do to mitigate any risks that you may be coming up against. So there's the whole approach and demeanor about it was really, really good. VCs that obviously are able to help their startups with funding in times of crisis, whether it's needed or not, if the offer is made, things like that, really, really helpful. And our VCs, offered to fund us if we really needed it.
Wicked.
So it's just things like that that they were able to do, like really, really good. One extra point I'd like to make as well is, and I didn't initially look for it until I found out about our VC, but I would definitely advise other founders too as well, is the structure of the VC fund. So if you've got a VC fund that is like an evergreen fund, for instance, the way that is managed, it means that they won't really have a set date in terms of closing an amount of deals and having an exit value at a certain point in time. That means that the way that the VC is going to approach how you accrue returns, you're obviously still going to need to grow really, really quickly, but there won't be a set date at which they might try and force an exit or something like that. So that was a really interesting operational point, which shows in how the VC's been treating us so far. So
very, very important point there, Christian. I think, and just kind of more broadly on that point, is just make sure your objectives are aligned. Make sure you're shooting it from the same point and making sure you're heading in the same direction. Because like you said, if they've got some sort of concern on their head that they need to meet a certain criteria objective and you're trying to move in a different direction, you're just setting yourself up for tricky conversations every few weeks.
Exactly.
Christian, before I let you go, I appreciate your time. Just what's next for you? You've raised this fund. You've definitely got an exciting business you're working on, which scratches an itch, which a lot of people have. We don't like those ads on our games where we have to navigate away. What's next for you? You've got your team set up. You've got your VC fund on board. We're coming out of this pandemic. What's next for you?
So the next thing is to really accelerate growth through the enterprise partnerships that we've got in the pipeline. So I can't obviously say like what we're patenting, but we've got a patent that we're filing. There are a number of investments from the funding that we receive that we're making in the key partnerships that will enable us to scale to not a couple of 100,000 players, but a couple of 100 million players. So it's using the time from the pandemic in order to make sure we've got the right product market fit, so that we can tackle the biggest clients in the best possible way. So I'd say that's one of the main objectives, outside of obviously scaling up sales now that we're coming out of the pandemic and people are starting to work, more normally.
And just lastly, before I let you go, how have you seen? What's the games market been like during this pandemic? Has usage just shot up? What are the number of impressions you're seeing on your ads? Like, what's that look like over the pandemic?
No, it's a good question. And the game market has grown over 70%. So it's been massive. But there's a double-edged sword to things. So I guess an insight for everyone is the games that are currently in the market have grown over 70%, which is obviously great. But when it comes to the games that have yet to be released, there have been delays because developers can't meet up and have these whiteboarding sessions, for instance, to release their games. So that's been a caveat there. But overall, the gaming market's grown over 70%.
Wicked. So that will be in good stead for the next 6 months to a year. And we definitely need to get you back on, see how your progress has been.
No, would love to. No, it's been great speaking to you.
Christian, pleasure's been mine. Thank you for jumping on, and wish you all the best.
Thanks for your time, Jess. Take care.
Bye. Take care. Bye.